I was born in Hertfordshire. This was during the war. My father was serving with the army in the Middle East. My mother was working in a munitions factory in Buntingford. So I spent most of my time with my grandparents. And to this day I swear that my first memory of seeing anything was sitting in my pram in the garden and watching what I now was told a V1 rocket flying over towards London, and that's the very first thing that I remember. I wasn't a good child. I apparently put the cat in the dustbin. I spread onions around the garden when they should have been hanging in the shed, and I put a fork through my grandfather's cigarettes, which weren't plentiful at that time. They were sausages in my mind, so they needed to be prodded with a fork. Set up a commercial stationery company and ran that for near enough 20 years. And it was during that time that I was fortunate enough to be able to purchase a Ferrari, and I joined the Ferrari Owners Club. The editor of the Ferrari magazine asked me to do some articles, and being interested in motor racing, I did those for him. And then he was getting a little bit tired of just the articles on European racing. He said, "Can you come up with something different?" So I started looking at what hadn't been written about and discovered the Bahamas. And I thought, I know something about the Bahamas, but I didn't at that time realise the extent that the Speed Weeks had taken. So I started researching those purely for Ferrari at first. Believe it or not, it was never my intention to actually write the first book that I wrote. It just evolved. So I wrote the article. It seemed to go down well. It was reprinted in the American magazine Cavallino. They enjoyed it as well. So I thought, well, there's more to this. So I started researching. I went to the Bahamas, spent a couple of weeks over there, and to my horror, discovered that they had little or nothing in the way of records. The government in 1967 decided that enough was enough, and they had destroyed most of the records. So apart from what was in the library, apart from the magazines, and then contacting people, all of the research took 6 years. And after that I decided to approach Rod to see if he would publish the book. He readily agreed. The rest is history on that. Right, the first book I had published was the Bahamas Speed Weeks, and that was published in 2006. It followed on from the 6 years of research that I did. Rod agreed to publish it. It has proved very successful. But naturally, as things progress with time and more people begin to get interested in the Bahamas Speed Weeks, extra information came to light. Not only that, but there have been 2 revival meetings for the Bahamas Speed Weeks, which have now been included in a revised version of the book. It's a shortened version of the Bahamas Speed Weeks, but then incorporates the local racing that was conducted by the Bahamas Automobile Club in the Bahamas as a club, as opposed to an organisation that was organised by Red Cries. So it was more succinct in its approach. It was almost a resume of the races and the drivers and the cars that took part in the races. It was part of the Those Were the Days series, so by its format it was restricted to about 126 pages, I think it was. I've had 4 books published by Veloce in all. The third book that they did for me was a subject that is near and dear to my heart, and is not generally realised by the public, that it actually, or the significance of the series. It was a series of races carried out between 1952 and 1954 on Strategic Air Command air bases in conjunction with the Sports Car Club of America. This particular series came about because road racing in the United States had all but been banned in most states. So therefore the SCCA were looking for other venues to actually hold their events. The fourth book that I did was on sports car racing in North East America. Now this came about because I was looking for a subject that hadn't already been covered by other authors. In the main, Europe and most of the cars had actually been covered. So as opposed to repeating what other people had tried to achieve, I thought I'd branch out and try and cover an aspect of motor racing which was very important but really had not been attempted by many people. Joel Finn had, in America, had done the Bridgehampton book, which was purely on Bridgehampton. I think Willem Oosthoek had tried to do a book on southern states in America, but I thought, well, the northeast of America, the mid-Atlantic states, and what I call Midwest of America had not been touched at all. After doing several years research on it, I could see why it hadn't been touched at all. It was extremely difficult. I think it took about 4.5 years, and I think, in fairness, if I was to approach that book again today, I could add another 30 pages to the book. It's like all research, it's never ending. You can always find someone or something that gives you extra information, and that is what is happening. Yes, the Ferrari book is one of the World Sports Car series that I spoke with Rod about, and he was keen that I put together something on the Ferrari 333 SP. Now, originally when I was requested to do this, I thought to myself, well, it's possibly out of my comfort zone. It's not the period of racing that I was used to, but I found, much to my pleasure, that I had a lot of assistance from people in America in particular. They were very keen to help me on this. They also seemed to appreciate that this was a car that was unique in several of its aspects. It was a Ferrari, and it had returned to sports car racing after a period of 20 years where they had been absent from the field. Secondly, it's unique insofar as that it was never raced by the factory. It was only used by privateers, and out of about 123 starts off the top of my head, they had 40 some odd victories. So it was quite a significant car. But unfortunately, Ferrari as a factory never really developed the car. They initially gave it out to Dallara to do the bodywork on it and the chassis, and then it was handed over to Michelotti, and they did a few adjustments on the car, but not a lot of money was actually spent on the car. But the book itself will prove that the car was worthy of being developed, and a lot of people will realise that had the factory spent money on it, it would have been running for another at least 5 years, very competitively.